You could say markets are still in a wait and see mode, relieved that tougher sanctions were not imminent after the Trump Putin summit, even as UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, EU President Ursula von der Leyen, and other European leaders join Volodymyr Zelensky in Washington to discuss a way forward. This meeting could potentially lead to a peace settlement in the troubled region. Also, more details emerged yesterday as Special Envoy Steve Witkoff said Putin had agreed to allow the United States and European nations to give Ukraine a NATO Article 5-like protection as a security guarantee to bring an end to the war. Whether it's a ceasefire, peace agreement, or some sort of armistice leading to a cessation of hostilities, it does seem, albeit tentatively, that the chances for peace have improved. Hello, this is Bodi Oshosami, and welcome to Global Business Insights, where we consider themes from the latest headlines and how they move markets and shape business strategy. On the US corporate calendar this week, we get more second quarter results, with the retail sector taking center stage as Walmart, Target, and Home Depot report their performance. On Thursday, economic data releases include initial jobless claims data and services sector activity. More clues could also come from Fed minutes released, that's on Wednesday, which will shed more light on the reasons behind Fed Governors Waller and Bowman voting against the central bank's decision to keep rates unchanged. That was last month. The oil market was flat, somewhat subdued after Trump's meeting with Putin in Alaska, where both leaders agreed to work towards a fully fledged peace deal rather than a ceasefire. Trump also confirmed that there were no plans to impose higher tariffs on China as a penalty for purchasing Russian oil. It looks like a no news is good news or to be continued scenario, with neither a deal nor more sanctions, even though existing European and US sanctions will continue to remain firmly in place. Market analysts watch the geopolitics, but exchanges are seeing new highs despite this conflict, apparently focused more on consumers, inflation, and the central bank commentary from the meeting coming up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. That's later this week. The dip in oil prices could be a buying opportunity as we see higher seasonal demand and improved global growth projections. But the significance of meetings happening at all, that's the Russia-Ukraine issue, point to calming tensions, even though one can only discern baby steps towards an accord. It would have been improper for Trump to declare any win without European allies, and we will see from subsequent discussions if indeed the groundwork was laid for a cessation of hostilities and just peace. The justice of any agreement in a war that has cost over 1 million deaths already has to be a complicated factor for negotiations. Markets can still expect some sort of accord within maybe 30 days, with only an upside from here, although there was no strong upward spike. If you look at sentiment, optimism was marginally up, given that there was no actual breakdown in the talks. Many also said, given the difficult circumstances, this was perhaps the best outcome. Another major event of market significance will be on Friday at the Fed's annual Jackson Hole Economic Symposium, where Federal Reserve Chair hosts the group of central bankers for the last time. And some say, being his last speech to the group, he may deliver the defining speech of his career. A last chance indeed to cement his legacy, even as he reiterates a much-repeated case for the central bank's independence. The annual symposium attracts the world's most influential central bankers on August 21 to 23rd at the Jackson Lake Lodge in Wyoming. This year's conference is themed Labor Markets in Transition and will focus on structural forces such as demographics, productivity, and immigration that are reshaping the US job market and the broader economy. Other challenges in navigating the Fed's dual mandate of price stability and maximum employment will no doubt be covered as the steering role of the Monetary Policy Committee in the face of political hostility becomes ever more perilous and difficult. Trump is threatening to sue Powell for mismanaging the $2.5 billion renovation of the Fed's building in Washington, D.C., and may still fire the Fed chair before his term ends. Potential replacements are being interviewed, we understand, focusing on credible veterans, not just willing to cut rates quickly, but able to advance a new radical, restructured and downsized Federal Reserve institution, and of course perhaps come under the much resented $2.5 billion renovation budget. Uganda has inaugurated its first large-scale gold mine. That's a $250 million Chinese-owned project that will also refine the bullion to 99.9% purity, according to a statement from the president's office. Uganda has a variety of minerals, including copper, cobalt, and iron ore, and wants to expand its mining industry and position itself as a major gold producer and exporter. The Wagagai gold mining project, inaugurated by Museveni, the president, on Saturday, is expected to process 5,000 tons of gold ore per day and produce about 1.2 metric tons of refined gold a year. Uganda is also currently constructing a $3.1 billion standard gauge railway to reduce the cost of transporting its exports and imports via neighboring Kenya. Billy Tom, president and CEO of Isuzu Motors South Africa, says it wants to position South Africa as the manufacturing hub of commercial trucks for the African market. This is to achieve increased volumes plus locally sourced parts, with the possibility of moving more production to South Africa as the African business continues to grow in a stagnant global market. Tom also sees advantage from the African Continental Free Trade Area, ratified by 49 countries, launched in 2021, even though less than half the members actively trade under the framework of zero tariffs. South Africa's automotive master plan has set a target of 60% local content by 2035, but this has remained stagnant at 39%, with 64% of vehicles sold in the country imported, mainly from Chinese vehicle makers. Israel's economy was hit hard by the 2-week shutdown in June during the operation in Iran, even as the economy shrank at an annualized rate of 3.5% in the second quarter. In quarterly terms, this is a decrease of 0.9%. That's quarter on quarter. Private consumption fell 4.1%. Public consumption fell 1%. Fixed asset investments fell 12.3%. And exports, if you exclude startups and diamonds, fell 3.5%. Imports, on the other hand, rose 3.1%. Financial Times, in a recent article on Nigeria, reports that in 2023, 800 manufacturers in Nigeria closed shop, according to latest data available from the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria. With so many international companies like Procter & Gamble, Unilever, GSK, PZ Cussons, Bayer and Sanofi, which bet on Nigeria as a potential emerging market growth area, have pulled out in recent years amid the macroeconomic problems. As the Tinubu government deregulated foreign exchange markets, and with the massive devaluation, the use of local raw materials in the manufacturing sector increased to an average of 57.1% last year, up 5 percentage points from 2023, according to the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria data. Also, analysts say in instances where some key raw materials are not available domestically, companies are finding ways of keeping costs down, with more invoicing done in Naira to reduce exposure to foreign exchange fluctuations, even as the Naira exchange rate has of late been far more stable. There are other legacy issues like insufficient electricity infrastructure and bad roads. Analysts agree that things are going in the right direction and business confidence has been improving, and forecasts of consumer spending are all trending in the right direction. The stability of the exchange rate has gone a long way to support planning and adapting supply chains and material sourcing strategy in a more stable context. Costs associated with poor infrastructure, insecurity, and especially inadequate electrical power supply in a domestic context of already high inflation means margins are being squeezed and consumer capacity to spend is severely strained, even as the Nigeria First policy is supporting local sourcing more than ever, which will help to also reduce costs. Analysts agree that the challenges are not going to vanish overnight as the government pledges to stay the course and build on the reform wins. Nigeria still has the highest inflation in West Africa, and a 15% target by the government this year is unlikely to be achieved. Also, last week, the World Trade Organization boss, Madam Okonjo-Iweala, urged the government to put more social safety nets in place for poor citizens to be able to cope with the economic hardship occasioned by the reforms. Lower crude oil prices will also affect FX availability and tighten the fiscal purse, but we've also seen a major upward spike in capital inflows, and foreign investors are far more positive on Nigeria given the massive unrealized potential and reform tempo. The Nigeria economy is growing much better than 4 years ago, but still in need of catalysts to achieve a much faster pickup in production activity. That could come from dramatic improvement in electric power supply and perhaps also from lower interest rates. One, of course, hopes the government's reform momentum will not be affected by a resumption of politicking towards the 2027 election, as many ministers will be sucked into the political drama playing out in their home states and expected to, well, as they say in Nigeria, perform. Asia Pacific markets were mostly higher as investors awaited talks between European leaders Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, who comes under US pressure to reach a peace deal with Russia that could involve ceding territory. Global markets are on edge as investors await outcomes of European leaders meeting in Washington. My sense is Putin, who sees Europe as part of Russia, may have perceived US desire to see a quick cessation of hostilities as naive and weakness. Zelensky is also unlikely to concede anything based on his extreme distrust of Putin. The only language Russia appears sensitive to is stiff economic pain from biting sanctions, which comes at a cost to the United States as well, especially as Trump needs oil prices to be low to offset tariff pressures on inflation. Europe may buy into the NATO-like security guarantee, and will back Ukraine in not conceding territory. My sense is the only way forward may be Trump moving quickly on tougher sanctions instead of wasting time on deals with terms that Russia is unlikely to adhere to. One can also expect crude oil prices to rise, of course, in this extreme sanctions scenario. On the other hand, given what some suspect is a very weakened Russian economy, Russia may surprise by agreeing to some sort of settlement to buy time to rebuild the war chest. This scenario will also allow Ukraine defenses to be refortified. Defense stocks go up in all scenarios, so go and buy. Well, that's it on this episode of Global Business Insights. Thank you so very much for watching, and Bode Oshosami. Bye for now.